The fastest way to lose money flipping houses is underestimating rehab costs. In this video, I'll show you how to get it right. If you've ever wondered how to estimate rehab costs for a flip, wholesale deal, or renovation, you're in the right place. I'm Ryan Zomorodi, co-founder and COO of Real Estate Skills, and today we're breaking down exactly how to estimate rehab costs from different levels of renovation to which repairs bring the highest ROI to the biggest mistakes new investors make. I'll also be joined by a seasoned real estate entrepreneur with nearly 2 decades of experience who's flipped countless homes and runs one of the top construction and development companies right here in San Diego. Together, we'll walk through the process step by step so you can approach your next project with confidence. Let's jump right into the conversation. I know you're going to get a ton of value from this one. Today, I'm joined by Henish Pulickal. He's a local real estate entrepreneur here in San Diego where we're headquartered. He's the owner of Cal HomeCo, a construction and real estate development company. And he's a real estate broker leading a team of over 20 agents. And he's been in the business for nearly 2 decades. And over the time, he's flipped countless houses. So today, we're going to be covering how to estimate rehab costs when you're house flipping and doing home renovations. So, Henish, how you doing today?
Great. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining, and excited to dive in today. So let's just talk about, understanding the different levels of rehabbing in a house flip, right? There's everything from a light cosmetic, lipstick on a pig, to all the way to a full gut rehab. And really, you and I have both done ground up construction. So there's a lot of different levels when it comes to rehabbing. So, first off, what do you consider the different levels of rehabbing when talking about a house flip?
When I'm looking at any property, I'm assuming it needs everything until proven otherwise, right? So I just assume that. And so my number that I usually go with is $100 a foot. If I'm looking at a 1,500 square foot house, I'm figuring it's going to cost me about $150,000 until I get new information. Oh, the roof is new? All right, I can knock off $10,000, $15,000 from that. So now I'm down to $140,000. Oh, the furnace is new? Well, that saves me $8,000 to $10,000. So now I'm down to $130,000. Oh, the windows are already new? Well, that saves another $10,000. So depending on what's been done to the property already, I can deduct that from my estimate, right? I'd rather start there than guess low and be like, oh, the roof is old, because most houses have old roofs.
Yeah.
And then now I've got to add that back in. So I like to work from that estimate and then go from there. And then in addition to that, you have to add the exterior, right? Am I just painting the exterior, or do I need to add some panels or some other decorative touches or a pergola or a patio or something like that to make it a little more attractive? Or is there a huge amount of landscape cleanup or no landscape at all? And we got to do some landscaping, or we need to add, turf or grass or irrigation. And that's in addition to the $100 a foot. So I'll have to put some kind of budget to that. At the minimum, I'm usually saying maybe, $3,000 to $5,000 for just some light landscaping. But there's times where we spent $30,000 to $50,000 because it's a big yard and it needed a lot of cleanup. And we had to put something down, especially at least in the front yard, to make it appealing for potential buyers. So those are kind of the basic rules of thumb that I start with. If it's a nicer house, $1.5 to $2 million plus end value, then I'm probably going to budget about $120 a foot because I know I need to put in nicer cabinets. I can't put in Chinese flat pack cabinets like we do in most places. Can't put in the cheapest appliance package. I got to put in nicer appliances.
Right.
I've got to put in nicer flooring. I might put in real wood flooring because people value that, and nicer doors and nicer windows. And so you have to budget according to the market that you're selling at, right? No one wants to buy cheap finishes in a $2 million houses because those are savvy buyers that know the quality of the different materials.
Yeah, very market dependent, in a place, in Southern California, San Diego, $1 million exit value is kind of where the median is. So you can get away with some entry-level finishes, entry-level rehab. But if you're in, Houston, Texas, $1 million is going to have a much higher expectation of finishes.
Correct.
So, so in your case, $100 a square foot is kind of the baseline that you look at pretty much any, standard house that you're looking to flip in San Diego. And that assumes, is that more of like a full gut rehab where you're opening up the drywall and replacing plumbing and redoing electrical, or is that more of like the cosmetic end of the spectrum?
It's still kind of cosmetic at that point. I'm not necessarily upgrading the panel or the behind the scenes electrical. But if it's not grounded, we're going to put in the GFCIs, right? As opposed to trying to run neutrals through the whole house, right? So still trying to limit how much work I'm going to be doing to it. Still a cosmetic remodel, but we're not going to try to hide any major defects. If we find problems, we're going to fix them, right? So, there's been houses we've bought, we pulled up the floors and like, crap, there's a foundation crack here, So we'll call in the foundation expert. They'll usually cut it out, staple it, rebar it. We'll look at the drainage issues around the house, add some French drains or add some gutters to prevent that from getting worse, and disclose it. And then we disclose it. Hey, we hired a licensed concrete contractor to fix this. It was done properly. And here's the pictures before, during, and after, so we can verify that. But you have to. That's why you want to put a contingency on these things too, of at least 10%, right?
Right.
Because some foundation damages are only $2,000, and many times they could be $20,000 or even much more than that. So it's good to get a good inspector on the property too, because regardless of how many hundreds of properties I've worked on and sold and flipped or whatever, I always bring a home inspector because they always find 2 or 3 or 5 things that I didn't see. And some of them can be pricey and some of them are minor. So either way, I know what I need to get into, and we have a detailed list of all the things that should be fixed that I know that the next inspector, when I'm done with this property, is going to call out if I don't fix it.
Right. So what do you consider a cosmetic rehab?
Yeah, cabinets, windows, floors, paint, light fixtures, exterior paint, doors. That's about that, is the cosmetic stuff. Sometimes you can remove a non-load bearing wall, and I'd still consider that cosmetic, right? If there's an interior wall, it's not structural, then no problem, we'll pull that out.
So you're doing, probably gutting the bathroom as well.
Absolutely.
Installing, new showers with the tile surround, kind of just redoing the whole entire kitchen and bath, right? Paint, flooring,
absolutely,
kind of the whole nine.
Absolutely, yeah. Removing the popcorn ceiling, giving it a smooth texture. We don't even want this rough texture stuff that was popular back a long time ago. Everything. So when you walk into it, it looks like a brand new house with new finishes that you could comfortably live in for the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Does that include removing any of the drywall, or is just kind of as needed, if there's big cracks that can't be fixed?
As needed, yeah. If the walls are rotted or got wet or have some growth on it, of course we're going to get rid of it and solve whatever caused the water damage. But if it's in decent shape, we could just sand it and prime it and paint it and it's good to go.
Yeah. So how would you compare that to a full gut rehab? I mean, what would you consider a full gut?
I've had to do a full gut rehab where, as we were taking the house apart, we kept finding more and more rotted wood, and almost all of the framing needed to be replaced. All of the roof framing needed to be replaced. We had to repair a lot of foundation stuff on there, all new roof structures. So that was a full gut rehab.
Yeah.
Down. And so, we don't have too many new builds here, but that's as close as we could get to a new build, because it was basically demolishing the house down to 2 walls and then rebuilding the whole house.
Wow. Yeah, that's really almost a new construction.
It's almost new construction, yeah, for sure. But we were able to save a couple of the pieces of framing. So for the city permitting process in that case, they counted it as a remodel instead of new construction.
Interesting.
Yeah, that saves you some time and some effort and money there.
Right. Yeah, typically when I think of full gut, it's basically, opening it up to the studs in the framing. But in this case, it's the framing's compromised. So
yes, correct.
Basically having to replace nearly everything.
It was everything. It was everything,
yeah.
And that was a killer because I'd estimated a $200,000 rehab, and it ended up costing about $300,000.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was painful, but it was that's the risk of getting city inspectors involved. And regardless, we would have done it anyways. It just makes it more expensive when the inspectors are involved, because once we open it up and we see bad condition wood, we're not going to let that sit there, because we want this to last the next 10, 20 years.
Of course. So you mentioned cosmetic rehab, about $100 per square foot.
That's San Diego. I get that other people can do it cheaper in other parts of the U.S.
Yeah, for San Diego, and then the quality of product that you and your team put out is really top notch. And I've seen a lot of your rehabs, and you could tell that you do invest more money in these homes than the standard flipper, the typical flipper. So definitely, kudos on the quality of work. I'm sure it does cost more than the typical rehab that you might see. outside of what you guys do. When it comes to full gut rehabs, do you have a dollar per square foot number, or like how do you estimate the cost of a full gut rehab?
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to get it done for about $150 a foot plus the landscaping. Yeah, so for $150 should get you there, depending on how much you need to redo. Otherwise, all the way up to new construction, it could be $300 to $350 a foot for additional square footage, or if you're really building new again. So anywhere between there is the estimates, and it varies. You really have to assess the property and have a good project manager or project coordinator that you're running that knows how to estimate this stuff and measure how much material you need, and how many windows there are, and how big they are, and how many doors you need, and is it just one HVAC system? Are we doing mini splits? Things like that. So I can usually come up with rough estimates, but then typically you need someone that's experienced on the project management side, especially if you're using hard money with construction draws, so you can have those line items per trade, right? Because that's how those lenders are going to give you your construction draws back, right? We're going to spend $4,000 on flooring. We got $6,000 for windows, $8,000 for a new HVAC system. Cabinets are going to be $12,000, et cetera, et cetera. So having a detailed understanding of what that costs because you've worked on them is important for the lending side as well. A lot of it is the spreadsheets and the underwriting. And so you got to plug those numbers in.
Right. So obviously rules of thumb are great for, quick analysis, getting your offer in, really just doing that analysis. But the bigger the rehab, the more work it takes, the more you really have to dive in and peel back the layers and get someone in there, get eyes on the property, get that inspection, and really, dial in your costs. So you already mentioned some of the things that can influence the budget. What are those things that can, either reduce or inflate your budget, when we're talking about, let's say, a full gut rehab?
Yeah, I mean, the condition and the age of the major components, right? Furnace, water heater, roofing, windows. If those have been replaced in the last 5-10 years, they're probably in decent shape, right? Maybe not the water heater because those only last about 10 years, but furnaces are good for 25 years. Most roofs are good for 25 or more years. So if they're 10, 15 years or less, we're good there. I'll let that sit because it's good for the next 10 years is the goal. So those are big items. Those are the heavy, big ticket items. And so understanding how old they are or how old you could estimate them to be is useful, right? That's where a good home inspector comes in handy again, right? Because they can look at a old furnace, run the serial number and tell you, yep, this was manufactured in 2015. It's only 10 years old. Right. And so we can kind of tell that kind of stuff, or they can eyeball a roof and tell you that, yeah, it looks like it's got at least 10 years left in it. Right. And so I think those are the kind of some of the few expensive items on there. Depending on where you're at, retaining walls can be really expensive, and people don't think about that. Right. If you got a failing retaining wall, that could be, $2,000-$3,000 on the low side to $20,000 to $30,000 or more on the high side, depending on how big and how wide and how tall they are.
Yeah. A lot of factors that go into it. When it comes to buying, fixing, and selling a house, what are some of the most common repairs that you'll do when you're going to be selling it to a homeowner? What are some of the highest ROI improvements that you've seen made all the difference when it comes to the numbers on a flip?
I mean, having the curb appeal is nice, so having some kind of good color scheme on the outside, maybe a panel or maybe some kind of sizzle feature on the outside is helpful. But then you also have to wow them when you get in the inside. So everyone dreams of that dream kitchen with the island and the open concept. And so having a nice kitchen with the quartz countertops and a waterfall edge and stainless steel appliances still seems to have a pretty good ROI. Same with a thoughtful bathroom, put in the shampoo niches in the tile, put in the medicine cabinet because people like medicine cabinets, and make sure you have a bathroom vent because a lot of people don't have that. And just small stuff like that. But, I think get the kitchens and bathrooms right, pick some neutral colors, stage it nicely. I think staging has a nice ROI because a lot of people don't have vision and they can't imagine the house furnished. So you need someone to come in there and saying, okay, we'll lay it out like this. And a lot of times people say, perfect, this is how I would lay it out if I moved here, And sometimes they want to buy that furniture, and sometimes they just know that that's where they'd place their own furniture. So I think staging has a good ROI as well.
Yeah, and you're referring to physical staging, actually putting in the furniture versus the virtual staging that, we see a lot.
Correct. Yeah, both are good, but yeah, absolutely having the real stuff is better.
When you do an open house, if someone sees something online, they walk in, it's completely empty, they're going to have a different impression versus actually having nice furniture that fits the property. So
correct. Yeah, and absolutely. And, as a realtor, I know that it's nice to be able to sit down at a staged dining table and get some paperwork done right on the spot in the house if I need to. Right. And if you don't have any furniture there, You can kind of do it on the kitchen counter, but it's a little less comfortable.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's nice to have the furniture there. It really fills that vision in for that buyer, for what they're getting in that remodeled house with everything done properly.
Yeah. So you mentioned, kitchens, baths, curb appeal. Are there any other improvements that you're always going to do when you're flipping a house, to get the most value?
I always look for drainage issues. So if there's slope on the property is wrong and this sloping towards the house, I know we're going to have water issues. I try to fix that, put in French drains, change the grading, and I think that's key because that's one of the biggest findings that inspectors find and saying, hey, this land is sloped towards the house, you're going to have problems, or it already has problems.
Yeah, true.
Right. So I think that grading around the house and understanding what's ideal is important before you sell it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that you'd say that because it's something that most buyers aren't initially looking at, unless they're a little more experienced with purchasing homes.
Correct.
So,
yeah. No, when I, a lot of times when I'm taking out regular clients, I'm teaching them how to assess properties, and that's the first thing I'm looking at. I'm walking the perimeter and seeing how the grading looks around the property. Are there gutters? Because even though we don't get too much rain here, after 30, 40, 50 years, it adds up. And that water next to the property will cause major damage.
Right. Yeah. You're talking about mold, but also the pressure, on the foundation,
Correct.
Cracking, things like that. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of basements here, but when there are basements, that's when a lot of these the water pressure issues can really come to the surface. So,
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, let's say you found a new opportunity. We're just talking about a couple opportunities here. Close to where we're at right now. You're going to see a distressed house. How do you go about creating a scope of work, that ultimately line items out what you and your team are ultimately going to do to the property?
Yeah, I mean, we've got this pretty dialed in now. So my project manager knows what he needs to do, but I'll put that budget together and I'll put on my nice to haves. Hey, I definitely need this wall removed, right? Or we definitely need to get rid of this furnace and put it into the attic so I can make more common area space. We're definitely cleaning up the backyard. We're going to add some gutters, So whatever my wish list is that I need to put into the budget, I put into the PM. But then we're also getting that home inspection done, so I can go through and say, let's fix all of these things also because I don't want them to be an issue with the next buyer, right? So those are my two things. So I'll look at it and say, from the lens of a potential buyer that I want to pay too much for this, what am I going to do? My PM also likes design and construction, so he has his ideas as well. So he might pitch something, and then the home inspector. So I think between the three of us, we get a pretty good setup there.
Yeah. So you'll do a home inspection when you're buying the property,
Yep.
Or at the beginning phase of the project. And then I guess tell me a little about your process of actually creating that scope of work. You have a project manager, and I mean, you guys go out with a clipboard and spreadsheet, or you have another kind of system that you work when you're going through it. You have a checklist. How do you physically create that, and how do you categorize it? Because I've done it several different ways where it's room by room or more component by component of the property. So what's your thought process behind actually creating that plan?
It's typically based on lender specifications, right? So typically lenders have a scope of work sheet that they want you to pull out and use. How much are you spending on plumbing? How much are you spending on HVAC? How much are you spending on windows? So they have them all lined out by the trades so they know that they can do an inspection and say, yep, it looks like these are all new windows. We'll release that $10,000 and then that window draw for you. Right. So we're typically following the lender's scope of work that they want for their construction draw schedule and using that. And that usually covers enough, and they'll have a few miscellaneous categories in there if we're going to do something different, right? Retexture the basketball court, put it in a hoop, or fix the pool equipment, or whatever it's going to be that might not be on the original scope of work that we know we have to fix because pool equipment's $4,000 or whatever it's going to be. So that's usually what I'm using. So because almost every time I'm using a lender that has a construction reserve for me.
Yeah, got it. And then as far as, when you have this scope of work, I mean, what's your typical order of how you approach the different improvements, right? Is there a sequence that, is kind of standardized? You start with the paint, then move, to the next, to the inside, or, kind of start from the top down?
Yeah, honestly, that's outside of my scope of what I do exactly, but I usually let my PM manage it properly. Obviously, demos first. Clean the property up, demo it up. And we might do roof first and any kind of wood repairs or any kind of repairs behind the scenes if we're opening up walls. We might do that. And then, And then everything kind of happens fast after that. Once we've got the drywall and paint done, then the cabinets and floors and appliances and countertops and light fixtures all going pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. So there's a logical sense to it. And, I let my guys take care of it, what they think is best. We don't really have a problem with going out of order.
Yeah, you guys are doing how many projects at a time? You said like 16, 17 right now?
I think we're up to 22 right now.
Yeah. So you definitely have your systems dialed in. You have the team, the infrastructure, someone managing the projects full time. So it's awesome to see what it looks like at scale. So as far as, you mentioned estimating the rehab costs, you kind of go according to the rule of thumb. Is there a point in the process where you go beyond that rule of thumb and start to get subcontractor quotes, or is it, like, what does it look like to kind of go beyond that, or do you really just kind of stick to that number throughout?
Yeah, I mean, we still have to use subcontractors for some stuff, right? I mean, especially things like HVAC and roof and windows and stuff. We are hiring specialists for those. We do enough where we have a rough idea of what they're going to charge, and ideally they fall within that, or we still might get a couple other estimates or try a new subcontractor out. So we typically know this well enough because we're doing it every day, what each trade is going to cost and based on the size of the house or the quantity of the material needed. So we're pretty good on that. We can look at prior to estimates and know where it's at and give or take a few percent because there's inflation is real.
Yeah. I mean, you as the owner of a construction company, you've seen a lot of projects. You've done a lot of projects. I mean, how has inflation really impacted us, let's say, since 2020? I mean, how have you seen costs of both material and labor as far as what you're seeing?
Not significantly. I wouldn't say it's been more than 10%, in that amount of time. But yeah, I mean, back in the day, there's times in prior years where we would do rehabs at $70, $80 a foot or less. But now I just budget $100, just knowing that, some materials are more expensive, some labor is more expensive, and people are charging a bit more. So I can't use pricing from years ago to affect pricing today. We just know what the pricing is today.
Right. Yeah, and you got to stay up to speed. Like you said, you can't rely on old numbers to do projects today. That's how you can get yourself in trouble. So as far as other factors that will affect the overall project cost, you mentioned the market, can go up or down depending on the after repair value, the neighborhood, the comps, the scope of work itself. I mean, are there other factors that may fluctuate the budget more than others, or anything that can kind of impact the overall amount of money you're investing into a property?
Nothing specifically I can think of. The unknowns are the hard things. Foundation repairs, retaining walls, drainage issues, sloping issues. Those can get expensive, and don't underestimate how much that can cost. Because a retaining wall, $20,000 isn't too much to fix a retaining wall. It could be that much. Yep. And if you're only expecting to make $30,000 or $40,000 on a flip, a $20,000 retaining wall can kill you. Or a $20,000 foundation repair. Those kind of things can be very pricey. So yeah, I had a pass on a flip opportunity this morning in Spring Valley. The pitch was, hey, do you want this house in Spring Valley? Of course it has foundation issues. I'm like, pass. And so then there's also a little bit of market knowledge too. I don't know if you're aware, a lot of houses in Spring Valley, one of the major developers there got the permits, would have forms in with rebar for the foundation, and apparently would remove all the rebar, take it to the next house, pour the concrete, so he could save the money on the rebar per house.
Oh, that's horrible.
And so that's why all these houses in Spring Valley have major foundation issues where they're offset by 8-10 inches on these cracks because there's no rebar holding anything together.
Wow, that's unreal.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you don't take on like a lot of like the major foundation issues.
I mean, I'm okay with it if it's in a reasonable expectation, depending on what it is. The very first flip I had was like that, and we took on the project, so it can happen. You just have to estimate right, Major foundation repairs aren't $2,000. They're typically $20,000 or more.
Right. It's hard to put a rule of thumb on a foundation repair. So how do you go about estimating the rehab cost if a property does have foundation repairs?
Yeah, there's no easy way to do that. You almost have to get like that structural engineer out there and that concrete contractor out there that knows how to fix it and jack up a side and fix the drainage issues and figure out how to staple it back together or break everything and then re-pour everything. So it's hard to estimate that. You need the extra few days to get someone out there that's a concrete specialist.
Right. Yeah, you can't just say, hey, it's $20,000, hey, it's $30,000, because it could be a lot more than that.
It could be 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest mistakes that investors, especially new investors getting into flips or even experienced investors, make when they're calculating rehab costs?
I mean, typically they estimate too low. It's always that they heard from someone that you should get it done at $65 a foot, and then it ends up costing $130, right? And so that'll kill your deal and your propensity to want to continue flipping houses, right? And so the biggest advice that I give anyone that's trying to flip houses is work with someone that's experienced and share your profits with them, because it's better to have something to share versus having lost money on a deal that you did by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, for those who might not be doing the volume that you're doing or seeing as many projects as you're doing, how would you recommend that they go and accurately estimate their rehab costs?
It's not easy unless you're experienced in it. I think that you have to work with someone that's experienced, or you have to hire a project manager that has experience doing flip properties and knows what that costs today. That was honestly one of the main reasons I started a construction company. Was when I was doing flips, my project manager and I had so much trouble dealing with other actual contractors to show up on time, get the job done at the bid that they proposed, and not do bait and switch pricing and have this job creep that sneaks in because I didn't realize we needed to fix this also. I'm like, well, what did you think? Like I don't understand. So. It can be frustrating until you have experience with someone or a strong referral that they've worked for people successfully to trust their numbers, because that's a common practice in this business is for contractors to underbid their jobs.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that myself too. Talking to several contractors, it's very attractive to see the lowest price and say, oh, this is a great deal. But then they come back with change orders, and then all of a sudden, $40,000 budget turns into $65,000 when you're not expecting it. So I've definitely experienced that earlier in my career.
For sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for a construction company, we're doing almost all of our projects for clients and not for my own projects. And we're finding that most of our clients are people that have already had that nightmare experience with a cheap contractor. So they said, okay, cool, let's pay a little bit more and get this done right. A lot less stress. We know the number is going to finish at the number that they said. And that's been the cornerstone of our company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing, we advise our clients to get multiple bids from contractors, just make sure you're really assessing multiple options. But if you don't go to them with a scope of work that's complete, then it almost doesn't matter what the bid is, because there's going to be more work involved.
Yep.
So if you don't know how to look at a property and go through a checklist and systematically say, this is what we need to do to get it to a resale condition, then you're just going to be missing you're going to be missing a lot of repair items, and your budget's going to start inflating once you're into the project.
Correct, and that can be really hairy, especially if you have a construction draw. But if you have a construction draw for 40, contingency for 10%, you're at 44, and that costs you 65. Well, you got to find $21,000 from somewhere. That makes it hard.
Yeah. So I know, I agree. It's so important just to leverage those with experience, so they can help you see the things that you don't even know to look at.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I had I've got several agents on my team that flip houses, and one guy had budgeted $65,000 for a 1,300 square foot house, and I said, you should budget $130,000. And he said, no, I think we can get it done for $65,000. I was like, just budget $130,000. If you don't need it all, then you don't use it all. And sure enough, he finished at $130,000. He's like, I'm glad I listened to you. He's like, because otherwise I wouldn't have known where to come up with that extra $65,000. And he ended up making $75,000 on the deal, but it's because he did the job right, as opposed to trying to cut a bunch of corners to try to get it done in $65,000.
Yeah, and that would have cost him his entire profit, right?
Easily, yeah. And then who knows, no one might have bought it in the condition that he would have had it at with that cheap remodel, because people want some value, and they want to see that that was done right.
Right. Yeah. People, they'll pay for good quality work, as I'm sure you've seen.
Correct.
And,
Correct.
Days on market can absolutely, ruin your chances of getting top dollar. Longer it sits in the market, the less people, want to pay top dollar. And it just, the more days on market, it just gets stale.
Yeah, there's not too much to beat up on that. I mean, I think the key points are work with someone experienced. If you don't have the experience yourself, I think you should partner with someone. I mean, my first 30 flips were with the partner that had flipped 200 homes. And so we got our scope of work right and our budget right because he had that experience. Otherwise, I would have had a hard time figuring it out myself.
Yeah. How would you go about, or how would you recommend people partner with someone who's much more experienced?
Yeah, I mean, if you have access to all the flippers in town, great. If not, even Property Radar, you can look up all the investor buyers that have bought a house in the last month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and see the ones that, go interview with them. Say, hey, can I work with you and provide value by bringing properties? And maybe you could teach me some stuff too. Otherwise, your hard money lenders that are working hard to earn your business in your market have those lists as well. And they might be able to introduce you to some flippers and investors that they're friends with that are looking to add staff or acquisition people. And they'll teach you along the way because they want you to get the numbers right so they can get properties. So I think a couple of options like that, whether it's your title or escrow people, your hard money lender, even through the systems directly, you can tell who the investor buyers are and hunt them down and ask to work with them, right? This is a hard job to do as a newbie.
Absolutely, yeah. Add value. You find the people who are active, who are doing real deals, making real money, who are doing this every single day, and carve out value. Or bring them deals, work for them for free, and then ultimately you'll get in the mix of these opportunities. Hopefully, carve out some equity, maybe bring something to the table on a particular deal, and then now you're flipping houses and getting that real experience.
Right.
So love that. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Henish, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for chatting about rehab costs, flipping houses, your wealth of knowledge. So looking forward to chatting again soon.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, where can our audience find out more about you? If you're looking for anyone in San Diego, Southern California, looking for a great construction company to help you remodel your homes, help you flip houses, definitely connect with Henish. Where can our audience find you?
Easy to find me. You could Google my name. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm pretty much the only Henish Pulickal you'll find. Maybe one of the only Henishes in San Diego. Otherwise, my website is calhomco.com, and you can find us on all the social media outlets as well.
Perfect. Thanks again for coming out, Henish.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you want to learn more about how to start and scale a real estate investing business, just go to realestateskills.com to learn more.